Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope all my students are okay. Well, if the answer is yes, that is a wonderful answer, and I'm sure that all you are okay. Well, I want you to recall previous two sessions, session number 32 and 31. We tried to understand the most difficult and the most technical part of phonetics and phonology, in the sense that most of the second language learners, especially of this part of the world, in fact, they find difficult to understand vowels of English language, and especially when we talk about diphthongs and triphthongs of English, of course, the things are a little bit difficult for them. But I'm sure by this time you must have practiced a lot, as I requested you that you have to record your voice or demonstration. You can exchange that demonstration with your friends, your class fellows, and exactly through this practice you can improve the understanding of English vowels, which are monophthongs, diphthongs, and triphthongs. My dear students, our today's session is session number 33. I welcome you to session number 33. Well, what are the topics we have to discuss and understand, in today's session? That is session number 33. Now, we shall try to understand first the segmental units, which are phone and phonemes. So our first concern to understand is, what are segmental units, which are of course phone and phonemes. And the second part which we have to understand is suprasegmentals, and they are stress, rhythm and intonation. Stress, rhythm and intonation. And the third area which we need to understand today is the features of connected speech. What are the features of connected speech? That means we will be talking about segments or segmental, and we shall be talking about suprasegmental. If I say segmentals or suprasegmentals, when I say segmental, that means that I shall be, or we shall be, talking about phones and phonemes. And when I say suprasegmentals, that means I shall be talking about, or we are to talk about stress, rhythm and intonation. And at the same time, the third area which we need to discuss today is the features of connected speech. Well, my dear students, before I talk about this slide, or what is the thing we have to learn from this slide, I want you to recall the very first session of this program. Do you remember that we tried to pronounce two words, phonetics and phonology? That doesn't mean that we were engaged in the actual pronunciation and this is what we are going to learn. But there were many other things, in fact, engaged. And about those things we were never conscious before the time we picked up this course that is known as Phonetics and Phonology. We were only concerned with the pronunciation of two words. I asked you to pronounce these two words. The first one was phonetics and the second was phonology. I did not ask you anything. And I said at that time that it is possible some of you pronounce this word like that, or pronounce that word like that. But at the same time, I did not talk about the segments or the parts. This time we are talking about segments. As the top of the slide tells, the segmental units of sound. And if I ask you what is the meaning of the word segment, I'm sure all of you know the answer. You can call it a part. Yes, exactly. One component, all right, you can call it. But remember, we don't have to answer like this. Why? Because I told you many a time that you are a graduate whose major is English. If you come across this term, your response to this term should be different. I hope we also remember that one of the objectives of this particular course is to understand different terms you come across or which are related with phonetics or phonology. This time we are talking about segmental units or segmentals, and of course we shall be talking about suprasegmentals. Segment. What is a segment? The answer is segment is any discrete unit that can be identified either physically or auditorily in the stream of speech. So physically or auditorily, something which is called a unit. Unit of what? Yes, exactly, unit of sound. Unit of sound. Do you remember we talked about the physical properties of speech sounds? Yes, exactly. So segment is any discrete unit. Unit of what? Unit of sound, in fact, that can be identified either physically or auditorily in the stream of speech. That means when we are speaking, this time I'm speaking English, and I'm sure you can identify the segments, all the segments. If you concentrate on my pronunciation or the sound what I'm uttering or producing at this time, I'm sure you can identify now. But remember, they are in the stream of speech, so this is what is a segment. But remember, in phonetics, the smallest perceptible segment is a phone. I also talked about this. But this time we are having another dimension. So in phonetics, the smallest perceptible segment is phone. Whereas in phonology, smallest segment is phoneme. Now you understand the segmental units of sound, that in phonetics, the smallest perceptible segment is phone, whereas in phonology, smallest segment is phoneme. So this is what you have to remember. Is it clear? Well, after understanding what are segments, I think now we are in the better position to understand what are phones and phonemes. But before we talk about anything, I think it's necessary to recall certain things which we have already done during the course of this semester. I hope in the beginning I had a talk with you about segments. When I was talking about phonetics, yes, deliberately I mentioned English language, although I didn't want to mention any language when I talk about phonetics. But I think so. I try to bring certain examples whenever I want to, or whenever I decide to give some sort of examples. Definitely, I picked up the examples from English language. Why? With an emphasis that your major is English, and I think it's appropriate to refer to English language. Now, remember, since we are nowadays we are talking about suprasegmentals or suprasegmental phonology. Remember, everything is very much based on the understanding of segments. It's very important to understand what are the segments. I had a talk with you when I was talking about the previous slide, that what are segments. Now, if I say, for example, that I'm talking about English phonology, so the segments, in fact, they become phonemes when I talk about phonology. And when I refer to phonetics, definitely these segments become phones. Now, if I say phonemes, phoneme, that is the smallest unit of sound. And when I say phonology of English, what does that mean? That means that I'm referring to the phonemes of English language. And how many phonemes we have? Yes, definitely, we have traditional 44, and at the same time, we talked about 5 triphthongs. I had a detailed analysis on monophthongs, on diphthongs, and on triphthongs. Now, this is the time to understand the things with a different dimension. We are this time talking about phones, and that's why before talking about phones, I asked you to refer to certain things which we had already done, right? We try to understand the classification of consonant sounds. At the same time, we try to understand what are in fact vowel sounds, right? So this time we are concerned with phones. Now remember, a phone is a speech segment that possesses distinct physical or perceptual properties. Can you recall again that we talked about the physical properties of speech sounds? I hope you remember when we picked up some branches of phonetics, we did talk about these things. How do we produce the sound? What is the sound in fact? Okay, starting from the speaker's mouth to the hearer or listener's ear. I told you during the very first session that many things are in between these two spots or points. Now, what is a phone? I hope you are in the position to understand that if there is a question, what is a phone? So the answer could be, in the simple words, that it is a speech segment that possesses distinct physical or perceptual properties. But at the same time, there are other words which we can utter with reference to the understanding of phones. Now, it is a particular occurrence of speech segment. Particular occurrence of speech segment. That's very important, right? All the things are interconnected. So nothing is what we say that we are talking in isolation. No, I'm not talking in isolation. I'm trying to correlate. There are certain ways to say one thing, depending upon the speaker, right? There are certain statements available over here. And then a basic unit revealed via phonetic speech analysis. Now watch. When we understand, or when we try to understand a phoneme, a phone, now there are three statements available before us. If there is a question, then what is a phone? I mean, you can give three statements, but remember the meanings are the same. The first one is a speech segment that possesses distinct physical or perceptual properties. The second could be a particular occurrence of a speech segment, and third could be the basic unit revealed via phonetic speech analysis. So this is what we call phone. Phone. When we talk about phones, we talk about phones. When we talk about phonology, we talk about phonemes. This time we are talking about phone. So phones and phonetics. Is it clear? Now let's try to understand what are phonemes. What are phonemes? I've already talked about this, that when we talk about phonology, and this time we are talking about English phonology, and when we say English phonology, that means we are talking about English phonemes. Now, if there is a question, right, what are phonemes? Again, there are two statements. Of course, one example is given over here as well. Now, I would like to read the first statement for you. In human language, a phoneme is the smallest unit of speech that distinguishes meaning. In human language, a phoneme is the smallest unit of speech that distinguishes meaning. That's very important to understand. One phoneme is different from other. Always remember. For example, let's talk about the recent things which we have done. We try to understand what are monophthongs and what are diphthongs, and what is the difference between a monophthong and a diphthong. All are vowels, even the triphthongs, all are vowels. For example, we have got traditional 20 vowel sounds, and we have got more or less five triphthongs. But everything depends upon the pure vowels, which we call monophthongs, which are 12. And out of 12, we have got 7 short vowel sounds and 5 long vowel sounds. Now what happens in fact, when we talk about diphthongs, the pure vowels phoneme, I mean those symbols, those signs are used in diphthongs. Two pure vowels are together. But remember, one diphthong is an independent phoneme. An independent phoneme. That's why we gave them a name, glide vowel or gliding vowel. That is a vowel produced with a glide, such as A. So this is what is written over here. In human language, when I say human language, this time I'm talking about English language. It could be Urdu language if I'm talking about phonology of Urdu. Alright, definitely I'm talking about phonemes of Urdu. Or if I'm talking about French phonology, so that means I'm talking about the phonemes available in French language. But this time, since we are engaged in learning English and we are talking about phonology of English, so when I say in human language, of course this time, when you are just studying this course entitled as Phonetics and Phonology, that means English. So in human language, a phoneme is the smallest unit of speech that distinguishes meaning. Each phoneme, when used in different words, changes. Think about minimal pairs. Do you remember something about minimal pairs? With the change of one phoneme, the entire meaning of the word is changed. Not only the meaning of the word is changed, but the word first of all is changed. And when the word is changed, what happens? The new meanings are there. So this is what is to understand. In human language, a phoneme is the smallest unit of speech that distinguishes meaning. And then phonemes are not the physical segments themselves. Phonemes are not the physical segments themselves, but abstractions of them. Now this is what I still remember some of the students raised questions about abstraction. Abstraction. What happens? They have got sounds. And then one sound is different from the other. But it's very interesting that we also talked about allophones. Allophones, do you remember? The variations in the speech sound. One sound, but remember there are variation within that sound. For example, if there is a phoneme t, and if it is used in the beginning of the word as top, it has got different sound. But if it is used, say in the middle, in the word stop, so it has got some sort of variation within the t sound. Are you getting my point? So phonemes are not physical segment themselves, but abstractions of them. Now watch over here again. The example is the t sound found in words like tip, stand, writer, and cat are examples of phonemes. This is what is the elaboration of statement number 2, which says that phonemes are not the physical segments themselves, but abstractions of them. Now there is one phoneme that is t. There is one phoneme that is t. So we have got 4 words in which this phoneme has been used. This sound has been used. The first word is trip, then stand, then writer, then cat. And each word, remember, there is a variation. The sound is t. The sound is t. The phoneme is t. But what happened? So that's why we try to understand what if there is some sort of variation. So if there is a variation, we try to understand. We call it allophone. Is it clear? Now let's try to understand phones and phonemes by applying a different dimension. Right. Remember, some technicalities are there. I mean, you are the student of phonetics and phonology, and you should be knowing all these things. Because in the coming days, of course, the coming sessions, definitely you will be engaged in transcribing general English in phonetic transcription, or general English into phonetic transcription, or phonemic transcription. So that's why these things you must try to store in your mind. Remember, we use slashes for phonemes, and the slashes are in front of you. We have to write the phoneme within 2 slashes. What we do? We use slashes for phonemes. But remember, we use brackets for phones. Now the brackets are in front of you. Can you see that? We use slashes for phonemes, but we use brackets for phones. Now look, the vowel phoneme in the words bead and bean is represented as E. This is a vowel sound, this is a long vowel sound, this is pronounced as E. 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 But this time I am using this as a phoneme. As a phoneme. So you can write within slashes B, E, D. Bead. Within slashes. And then you can write B, E, N. Bean. Within slashes. But when you are talking about a phone, remember phone is represented as you can see on the slide, within the brackets, within the brackets, within the brackets. Is it clear? Good. Now let's talk about suprasegmentals. This is what I have been telling you, that we are engaged in suprasegmental phonology. But before we understand suprasegmental phonology, there are certain things we must bear in mind. For example, we try to understand segment, and when we mention the name segment, that means we have to understand what are the things, or what are something, or what are the terms which can be included in segments. And then afterwards we try to understand phone and phoneme. Alright, now suprasegmentals. Suprasegmental. Please do not pronounce this word as supra. It is not supra, it's suprasegmental. Suprasegmental. Is it clear? Now remember, in written English we use punctuation to signal some things like emphasis and the speed with which we want our readers to move at certain points. Now that means there is a difference between written English and spoken English. There are certain punctuations. I hope you know what are punctuation marks, and you are engaged since your childhood to use punctuation marks in your writing. So that means these are the signals. These are the signals. For example, if there is a question, our teachers told us you have to put a question mark at the end of the sentence, isn't it? There could be sign of exclamation, comma, dot, inverted commas, semicolons, colon, right, dashes, plenty of things are there. So what happens, in fact, that written English helps us to understand what? To understand that these are the signals which have been used by who? By the writer, right? So there are certain things, for example, if there is a comma within a sentence, that means we have to take a pause, alright? If there is a dash, for example, if there are colons, for example, so what we need to do, in fact, the writer is expecting us, the readers, to move at certain points. So these are the signals, in fact. But remember, in spoken English we use sounds in ways. So that is the difference between the spoken version and the written version. When we are engaged in written English, so we have got punctuation marks which play the role of signals. I mean, they are the signals, in fact, you know. Right? So there are certain things the writer wants the readers to understand. But in spoken English we use sounds in ways that do not apply to individual segments, but to stretches of spoken discourse. From words to phrases, clauses and sentences. Now watch. Listen to me very carefully. Listen to me very carefully. If I have to speak the first statement, right, and only the spoken version is there, the written version is not in front of you, that means I have to use suprasegmentals. Now watch, listen to me carefully. In written English we use punctuation to signal some things like emphasis and the speed with which we want our readers to move at certain points. Now what I have done, that I was trying to speak English by making different chunks, right? So that is different. Sometimes there is a discourse, spoken discourse is there, and it starts from the words to phrases, clauses and sentences. So we use sounds in different ways, right? It is always very important to understand that in the written English, I mean the written version, punctuations are there which work like signals. But what happens? What kind of signals we have when we have spoken English? Of course, we have got sounds. So that's why I have been emphasizing since day one that the most important thing is that you have to understand the phones and the phonemes. This time definitely when we are talking about phonology of English, we are talking about the phonemes of English. You must be knowing what are the symbols or the signs of all phonemes and what are the sounds they carry. Because the segments are there, then you have to use those segments in the suprasegmentals. I hope you can recall when I said that when you speak English, right, stress, intonation, something like that written, in fact you are, or maybe somebody else who's the speaker, he or she is sending message, conveying message, and not only the message, but emotions, attitude, approach, right, feelings, everything is conveyed with the help of suprasegmentals. Always remember, okay? So I want to elaborate the previous slide like this. For example, we use different sounds in different ways, so far as the spoken version is concerned or spoken English is concerned. So there are certain effects, in fact, you know. So such effects are described as non-segmental or suprasegmental. Such effects are known as what, or described as what? They are described as non-segmental or suprasegmental. Non-segmental or suprasegmental, or using the adjective in a plural nominal noun form, simply suprasegmentals. Simply suprasegmentals. This is what we call suprasegmentals. Such effects are described as suprasegmentals. This is what is the phrase you are with. Such effects are described as suprasegmentals, right? Suprasegmental, not supra. Suprasegmentals. So among these effects are such things as stress, intonation, tempo, rhythm. Now these are the effects of suprasegmentals. When I say what are the effects, name them. If there is a question, name some of the suprasegmentals effects. So the answer could be stress, intonation, tempo, rhythm. So these are in fact collectively known as prosodic features. Collectively known as prosodic features, and then I had a talk on this particular area. I still remember. So if there is a question, this time for example I ask you what are the suprasegmentals effects you know. So this could be, alright, things such as stress, intonation, tempo, rhythm. They are the suprasegmentals, and they are also known as prosodic features. Alright, what are the prosodic features? You can say, alright, stress, intonation, and tempo and rhythm are the prosodic features. Is it clear? So remember, whatever effects are, you must remember always all kinds of effects may signal meaning. So that's the very important thing. So they signal in fact meaning. Remember, they do not do so consistently from one language to another. That's the problem. If there are effects and they may signal meaning, remember one thing, and what is that? That they do not do so consistently from one language to another. And this can cause confusion to students learning a second language or foreign language. Remember, there are certain effects. English has got different effects, suprasegmentals, prosodic features. Urdu has got different, Arabic has got different. Time and again I told you, when I picked up a comparative study of different languages, such as Arabic for example, that is one of the foreign languages, and I try to compare and contrast Arabic with English, or maybe English with Urdu. So remember, each language has got its own effects. So there could be sometimes confusion, but you don't have to get confused. Is it clear? So let's introduce what we've been talking about, prosodic features or suprasegmentals or non-segmentals. Remember, in linguistic terms, the difference between intonation and accent is that intonation is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. That is little bit longer statement. That's why I want to take pauses so that you may be able to understand. So this is one sentence based statement. There are many things in it. That's why I want you to take pause and slowly we have to read it so that we may be able to understand. Now in linguistics or in linguistic terms, the difference between intonation and accent is that intonation is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. What is intonation? It is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. When we are speaking, this time, for example, I'm speaking, and you can understand and you can feel certain rises and certain falls during my speech, in my voice. So what is intonation? That is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. While accent is the distinctive manner of pronouncing a language associated with a particular region, social group, etc. You might have seen and you might have heard rather that his accent is very good. Her accent is very good. Right? But we never say her intonation is very good. Her or his intonation is very good. Now what is the difference? Now you can understand it. Intonation primarily is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. When we are speaking, all right, certain rises are there, certain falls are there. Sometimes we are putting questions, sometimes we are not putting questions, right? But what is accent in fact? That is a distinctive manner of pronouncing a language. Distinctive, associated with particular region. It is possible. All right, if I say Cockney accent, do you remember? Do you remember one sentence? That if you go to London, it is very much possible that the Cockney English is different from the English you people listen and while watching television or BBC News. It is possible the Cockney person is speaking some strange English, strange in the sense that you don't have those sounds. Do you remember one sentence when a speaker says, I think I'll throw a party on first day? But in fact the speaker was saying, I think I will throw a party on Thursday. So that is the distinctive manner of pronouncing a language associated with a particular region. It could be associated with a region. As I told you, for example, London people known as Cockney speakers. Social group could be highly educated, could be non-educated. Even in England, they have got their own way, they have got their own accent, blah blah blah. So whether of a native speaker or a foreign speaker, that makes no difference at all. It is possible that a native speaker has got this kind of tendency and we call it accent, right? Accent associated with distinctive manner of pronouncing a language, whatever the language is. So that distinction of pronunciation is associated with a particular region or a social group, and that can be possible. So whether the native speaker is concerned or the foreign language learner is concerned, right? So the phonetic and the phonological aspects of a dialect, this is what we say. Now the outcome is, what is accent? Accent is the phonetic and phonological aspects of a dialect. What is accent? The phonetic and phonological aspects of a dialect. Is it clear? So the standard pronunciation is not like that. One person has, it is possible one person has got his or her own accent, but the pronunciation of the same language, or the standard pronunciation of the same language, is not the way he or she speaks. Is it clear? Now let's talk about stress, rhythm and intonation. Stress, rhythm and intonation. Please pronounce these words like this: stress, rhythm and intonation. Okay? What is rhythm? That is suprasegmental stress patterns of time. Rhythm. Let's try to understand the relationship between stressed and unstressed syllables. The relationship between stressed and unstressed syllables. 2. Patterns of combination of stressed and unstressed syllables. I hope you know what is a stressed syllable and what is an unstressed syllable. If there is a word window, W-I-N-D-O-W, now this is double syllabic word. Remember, both the syllables will not be stressed, either the first or the second. Since this is a noun, that's why we have to pronounce this word as window. So win is a stressed one, do is unstressed one. Table, te is stressed symbol, bull is unstressed syllable. Is it clear? So then the third statement says the liaison or other phonological structures, assimilation, deletion, etc. We will be talking about assimilation and deletion, right? So there is a liaison. This word is also pronounced as liaison in American English. Alright, liaison, the relationship. Alright, contact or other phonological structures. So there is a combination, there is a relationship, there is some sort of connection. There are other phonological structures available, assimilation, deletion, right? So this is what we call rhythm. Is it clear? Now let's talk about stress now. What is stress? You can have this slide in front of you, but on the top right there is oval shape. Can you see that? So what it is written, what is correct word stress, right? And stars in fact are there, they are on the top of the words. What do they signify? The biggest star in fact is telling us stressed, right? Person, person. The first word is in the oval, person, and the second word is percent, percent. So the bigger star in fact tells us something about the stress syllable. The next word is bamboo, and the next is bamboo. So the bigger star is stressed, that means that is the place of stress syllable. Now let's try to understand what's written over here. Remember, the words accent, stress and emphasis are frequently used interchangeably. Sometimes accent, sometimes stress, sometimes emphasis. Interchangeably they are used in English, right? But you people are the students of phonetics and phonology. Your answers should be different from the rest of the language learners who are casual language learners. Your major is English. You are specializing in English linguistics. So that's why always remember that these words, accent, stress and emphasis, are interchangeably used and frequently used. Alright? But remember, a major characteristic of the English language is the use of strong and weak stress. Strong and weak stress. That is the characteristic of English language. Every word of more than one syllable has a syllable that is emphasized more than the others. This is what I told you, right? One syllable is always dominant and prominent. That is stressed. So this is what is known as accented syllables. So accented syllables receive more force and are louder than unaccented ones. Now you can have the example which is in the oval shape. Person, person, percent. Person, first syllable is stressed, accented one, accented one. This next is percent, right? The first syllable of the next word, percent, first syllable is unaccented, all right? And remember, correct use of stress is essential for achieving proper pronunciation of words. Now, why do we have this stress in fact? Correct use of stress is very important. Remember, if you want to have good pronunciation, if you want to have refined pronunciation of English, you should be knowing what is stress in fact, and what are the places where I have to stress. Maybe words, maybe sentences, maybe phrases, whatever they are. But the story starts from the word. You should be knowing if there is a one syllable word or single syllabic, when I have to stress it. That means that depends upon the context. She is a good lawyer. Do you remember the sentence? Do you remember the sentence? She is a good lawyer. Even you can stress is depending upon the context. You can stress a depending upon the context. So that's very important to understand. Is it clear? Now I want you to understand rhythm like this. Now this is a new dimension. Remember, rhythm is the speed and cadence of how you say a sentence. That's very important, right? And I must pick up the example first of all. For example, some beginner students might say each. Now listen to me very carefully. Listen to me very carefully. Some beginner students might say each word in a sentence at the same speed and sound little like a robot. Listen to me again. I'm saying some beginner students might say each word in a sentence at the same speed and sound a little like a robot. What happens if the same speed is there? I mean, this sentence is also self-explanatory. You don't have to speak robotic language. If the same speed is there, same sound is there, right, in each word, I mean, if you're speaking English like that, it is just like a robot, that you are speaking like a robot. But that doesn't happen to the good speakers. Human language is not spoken like that, especially English is not spoken like that. So this is what we call rhythm. Now you understand, this is the speed and cadence of how you say a sentence. Rhythm is what is the speed and cadence of how you say a sentence. Remember, developing different speeds and know when to slow down and speed up can give you spoken English more interest. Right? Different speeds, and you must know when to slow down and speed up. When to slow down and speed up. So that is what can give your spoken English more interest. Okay? If I'm speaking, for example, if I start speaking like a robot and I speak like this, my dear students, this is the speed and cadence of how you say a sentence. Do you think that you will have interest in listening me? I doubt. But when I say this sentence like this is a speed and cadence of how you say a sentence. So naturally the rise and falls are there, rhythm is there. So developing different speeds and know when to slow down and speed up can give your spoken English more interest. So that's very important to understand. Different speeds, you should be knowing when to slow down and when to speed up. So this is what is in fact giving some sort of attraction to your English, spoken English version. Is it clear? Good. Alright, let's start understanding intonation. Now, look, it is written here that intonation, this is the music of the language. This is the music of the language. Often questions can be asked with a rising intonation where the pitch goes up. The statement says, there are two parts of this statement. One is, this is the music of the language. Does it mean the language has got a music, or language is musical? What is your answer? Yes, language is musical if it is spoken with intonation. Often questions can be asked with a rising intonation where the pitch goes up. That means if you want to put a question in spoken English, you have to rise your tone. Intonation, rising, rising. So this might be a genuine question to which you don't know the answer. Alright? For example, there is a sentence over here, and I'm speaking this sentence in two ways. The first one is, John's still on holiday. But if I say, John's still on holiday, so this is said with a rising pitch, means it's a question which needs answering. When there is the rising tone at the end, that means the speaker wants the answer to that particular utterance or question, whatever. And if it is a dropping or the falling tone, so that means there is no need to have any answer. But if it is said like this, John's still on holiday, right? So that is a questioning style. Is it clear? But remember, if the same sentence, if it is said without a rising intonation, it's information. If that sentence is said without a rising intonation, so it's information that you already know and you may just need confirmation. It could be just information, but it's not a question. So intonation can also show emotions like surprise, etc. Right? Do you remember the sentence, she is a good lawyer? She is a good lawyer. She is a good lawyer. That means, huh? Who told you she's a lawyer? Somebody told me she is a doctor. Or maybe the other answer is that, so do you agree that she is a good lawyer? In fact, she is a good lawyer. So because there is a rising tone. Is it clear? So let's give some time to features of connected speech, because in the coming days we have to talk more and more so far as these areas are concerned. So let's read the first statement. It's written that in spoken discourse the boundaries between words are very often not clear-cut. In spoken discourse the boundaries between words are very often not clear-cut. Right? We do not know what are the boundaries, depending upon what the speaker's intentions are. And words and sounds are lost and linked together in different ways to enable us to articulate with minimal movement. What happens? Words and sound are lost. Elision, assimilation. Some words are included, some sounds are included, some are deleted, excluded. Do you remember I said West German? I did not say West German. I said West German. So that means I am dropping the sound t of West. This is what? Here is the meaning. Right? Words and sounds are lost and linked together in different ways to enable us to articulate with minimal movement. Less movement. Some words are included, some are excluded. So this is one of the reasons learners find spoken discourse more difficult to understand than written discourse. That's a big problem. That's why we don't have good speakers of English around us, so far as the university graduates are concerned. Because when we come across native speakers, we try to, they speak naturally. They have got features, it is not, I'm not saying that each and every native speaker is a phonetician, but language has come to him or her naturally. So there are no features of connected speech. So our speakers, the foreign language learners like me, we find certain difficulties to understand the spoken version. That's very important. So for that reason, what we need to do, what is the recipe we have to follow? The recipe we have to follow is that we have to generate English speaking environment. Is it clear? For example, at higher levels, it is often not a lack of vocabulary which prevents understanding. At a higher level, for example, at your level, it's not the lack of vocabulary. You have got, I think, sufficient vocabulary. You can understand English, but it's not the lack of vocabulary always that prevents understanding. But what? Lack of ability to deal with these features of connected speech. So that means the features of connected speech are in fact difficult for us to understand, for the students or foreign language learners. Otherwise, you have got sufficient vocabulary to understand, and it definitely generates understanding. But what happens in fact? So lack of ability to deal with these features of connected speech, in fact. So that is the lack of ability of, features of connected speech, which in fact prevents us to understand or comprehend what one is saying. So remember, native speakers are more able to use top-down processing. They use top-down processing, the native speakers, to decide whether what they have heard is red die or red eye. That is called the top-down processing. When someone is speaking, they know that. If two English speakers, native English speakers are speaking, they know, both of them know. If one is saying red eye, the other is also understand it as red eye. The listener is not understanding this phrase as red dye. So what happens to the foreign language learner? It is possible he or she is, in fact, the speaker is saying red eye, but what the listener is understanding, red dye. That means the person who was red dye or something that dye or red dye means, if for example, you want to say, okay, you want to dye it red, okay, red color. If you are going to color your cloth, so that means you are going to dye it with red color. Is it red dye or red color or red eye? So that could be the possibility, isn't it? Okay. Well, my dear students, last but not the least, this is what is the most important part of our discussion always. So far as each and every session is concerned, this is what I always tell you, that you have to focus on the last part of our discussion, because that is based on self-assessment, and without assessing ourselves, I think it becomes difficult to understand whether there has been learning or not. So my satisfaction level is primarily related or based on the understanding of my students. Whatever I am saying, whatever I have said, whatever I have tried to analyze during the session, alright, the students can comprehend, they have understood it. How can I judge that you have understood it? Of course, you have to do something, right? That means when you do, you know the things. So this time I want you to tell me, what do you know about stress, rhythm, tone and intonation? So simply you have to explain with examples. So pick up some examples. I mean, when you speak English, when you listen some people speaking English, so please write down on it that what is stress, rhythm, tone and intonation. You understand what are these features, right? Suprasegmentals. So you have to write down your answer and put it in that folder. That's very important. So thank you very much for this session. From my side, goodbye and good luck. Stay blessed.